Hi, what is the most shocking thing that you learned about someone after their death? The twin that was gone. Back in 2010, I was working at this crappy call center. One of my coworkers was a young woman who was really loud and excitable. She was a nice person, but sometimes she could be a lot to handle. She always talked about her twin sister. Like, all the time. My twin did this. Yesterday my twin said that. My twin and I are going to Mexico for 2 weeks this summer. Stuff like that. I never gave it much thought. I figured she was just excited to have a twin. No big deal. Then, for years later, I was working as a financial advisor. I got this older client, around 60 years old. We started talking, and I said, "Hey, I used to know a girl with your last name. Do you know someone named Amber?" He laughed and said, "Oh. That's my daughter." Small world. I thought that was funny and didn't think much more about it. Later on, while setting up his retirement accounts, we talked about who he planned to leave his money to after he died. I said, "You mentioned Amber and your wife, but Amber always talked about her twin. I'm sorry to ask, but why isn't your other daughter included in this?" He told me that Amber's twin died back in 2006, 4 years before I worked with Amber. That hit me hard. Amber always spoke about her twin like she was still around. It made me so sad thinking about how lonely Amber must have felt after losing her sister that she kept pretending her twin was still alive. A few months after meeting her dad, I tried to contact Amber, but I found out she was in a psychiatric hospital on the other side of the country. From some Facebook digging, I learned that over the years she had been falling apart and couldn't take care of herself anymore. She had even tried to take her own life several times. Last year, her father told me that Amber had finally joined her sister. That's the saddest story I've ever been a part of in my whole life. My dad, the good doctor with a dark side. My dad was an alcoholic and had a serious gambling problem. But honestly, he saved a lot of lives and was a genuinely good man deep down. He worked as a surgeon for 20 years at one of the best hospitals in the country. But the corruption there was everywhere. If you had a family member in the emergency room, you pretty much had to pay off the nurse or doctor if you wanted them to actually take care of your loved one. If you were poor and couldn't pay, chances were your family member wouldn't make it. My dad, though, hated that kind of corruption. He refused to accept it and even made sure his team did not take any kickbacks. He tried to save everyone who came under his care, no matter what. When he died, around 300 to 400 people showed up at his funeral to say their last thanks. But the one person who stuck with me the most was an old man. He said that when he got out of prison, he had no money and no family. After a serious accident, he ended up in the emergency room, and my dad went above and beyond to save him. He even tried to get the hospital to forgive the man's medical bills. Still, none of us siblings really had a good relationship with him when he was alive. After my stepdad took his life. After my stepdad died by suicide, we started uncovering the reasons behind it. That very same night, we called his best friend. The friend said my stepdad spent most of his days at his house. To him, my stepdad said he worked nights. He would put on work clothes and go back home to my mom acting like he had been working all day. But his workplace told us he had actually been fired months earlier. In the days that followed, more and more letters arrived, bills totaling thousands of euros. Outside in the trash, there were torn-up bills he had grabbed before my mom got home every day. My mom pieced them all back together to get a clear picture of what was going on. He had also borrowed money in her name, about 15,000 euros, which she had to pay back because she couldn't prove he did it. At the funeral home, they noticed that he still had all his teeth because he hadn't been to the dentist. He never paid for health insurance. In the last few months, he sometimes pretended to be in pain, claiming his throat was so sore he could barely speak. We think he must have screamed in his car for hours just to sound like that, to fool us. He told his parents that he bought a new car the week before and even drove to visit them. But that car was actually on loan. He also said he found a wallet with 300 euros in cash. We had a good time with that money. Later, after he died, my mom found out that he had just withdrawn that money from his own bank account. He must have felt awful about all the money problems and seen no way out. We still miss him. He was a funny guy and taught me a lot during my teenage years. But man, he left a big mess behind, including his 6-year-old son, which makes me even sadder because his mom died when the boy was just 2. Finding a half-brother. Last fall, we learned something surprising about my dad's side of the family. My paternal grandmother had a secret child with a young soldier who had just come back to the United States at the end of World War II. When she died, we found a hidden collection of love letters between them. At the time, we asked her best friend, who is also my godmother, about this, but she said she didn't know anything about a partner like that. But then, thanks to some family members who got really interested in the story, we discovered that my dad and his brothers had a half-brother living only a couple of hours away. Last fall, this half-brother invited us over to his house, and we finally met him after all those years apart. We found out he was very close with the family doctor, who everyone called Uncle, even though he wasn't actually related. That afternoon was full of emotions. My dad and his brothers shared stories with the brother they never knew they had. They even found out that my oldest uncle, the eldest of my grandmother's children, was named after the family that adopted this secret son. Finding out my dad was adopted. After my grandfather on my dad's side passed away, I found out something I didn't expect: my dad and uncle were adopted. I was about 16 at the time, and my parents thought I already knew. Here's how I found out. Back in the 1980s, there was this TV show on NBC called something like the National Heart Health Test. It was a quiz where you answered questions, got points, and at the end, it told you your risk for heart problems. Kind of like those online quizzes you see nowadays. During the show, they asked if anyone in your family had a heart attack. I said out loud, yes, because my grandfather had died from a massive heart attack a few years earlier. That's when my mom turned to me and said, "You know your dad was adopted, right?" I just said, "No. But I guess I do now." The family secret about my dad's birth. The story goes that my grandfather killed my uncle because he thought the baby wasn't his. After that, my grandmother had another child, my dad, and they pretended he was the same baby who died. I don't know all the details because it's a very sensitive subject, and I don't feel comfortable asking more. My grandparents got married in the early 1950s. My grandfather was in the army and stationed in Germany during the Korean War, but he didn't serve in Korea. When his mother got sick, he came home early to be with her. Around that time, his wife got pregnant. But my grandfather didn't believe the timing made sense, so he thought the baby wasn't his. He shot the baby with his pistol, saying it was an accident while cleaning the gun. I don't know if the baby was actually his or not. Later, my grandmother had another baby, my dad, and they never went to a hospital. They just claimed my dad was the same child who died. We think my dad's real age might be about 2 years younger than what his birth certificate says. All this came to light after my grandfather died, while my grandmother was still alive. My dad already knew about it but rarely talks about it and still doesn't. The uncle we didn't know was family. When I was a kid, my dad had a friend we always called Uncle. As I got older, I learned that this friend said he was actually my paternal grandfather's son. My grandpa denied it, but my dad played along and got to know the guy anyway. Here's some background. My grandpa had 13 kids with 4 different women. One of those women wasn't even my grandma. Most of my aunts, uncles, and my dad refused to believe this friend was really family. They figured, why would grandpa claim all his other kids but not this one? Then, about 10 years after my grandpa died, my aunt got fed up with the friend tarnishing my grandpa's good name. So she took a DNA test and made the friend take one too. Turns out, the friend really was family, he was my uncle. My aunts and dad were crushed. They still get mad when my uncle calls them bro or sis because they think he's making grandpa look bad. Most of my family shunned this uncle his whole life, even though he tried to connect with them. So, long story short, grandpa was a rolling stone who fathered 13 kids. My dad's uncle friend turned out to be one of grandpa's children, but nobody believed him until after Grandpa passed and they did a DNA test. A secret shared hobby. After my grandfather passed away a few years ago, we were cleaning out his house when I found something surprising, a pretty big collection of playing cards. Most were casino decks from Las Vegas, but there were also some unusual ones, like a Jack Daniels deck and a military deck from Iraq with pictures of Saddam Hussein on the cards. What shocked me the most was that I had been collecting playing cards myself since I was about 12, and I never knew my grandfather had the same hobby. For 10 years, we shared this unusual interest, but neither of us ever knew. Now, I have all the decks we found in his house. It basically doubled my collection at the time. I offered to share with the rest of my family, but no one else was interested. It makes me a little sad that we never got to talk about it. If there is any kind of afterlife, I hope he knows his collection went to a good home where it will be appreciated. The Saddam Hussein deck is still sealed, and that is the one deck I will never open, even though I am really curious to see all the cards. A handkerchief from Grandma. This wasn't so much shocking as it was really touching. For my confirmation, I received a special gift from my grandmother, who had passed away 4 years earlier. She had made each grandchild a handmade bobbin lace handkerchief for their confirmation. I never knew about it before. Grandma must have known she probably wouldn't make it to my confirmation, so she made the handkerchief ahead of time and gave it to my parents to keep safe. I don't know exactly how long they had it, but since she died at 89 and had suffered from dementia for a while at the end, it was probably about 8 to 10 years. A patient's story of forgiveness. I'm a medical student, and recently I saw a new female patient at our clinic who was HIV positive. I had to ask her how she got the virus, whether it was through sexual contact or intravenous drug use. She told me it was sexually transmitted. The only reason she got tested was because her partner of 3 years, on his deathbed in hospice, whispered his last words to her, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you. Forgive me. That was heavy. To be clear, he died of cancer, not AIDS. Some people thought it was AIDS that killed him and assumed my patient should have already known her status, but that was not the case. She has been HIV positive for 20 years now, with no symptoms and an undetectable viral load. Her numbers are excellent. Medicine has come a long way, and HIV is no longer a death sentence for most people. The Bible, the hidden son, and my grandpa's hidden side. My paternal grandparents had a rough and violent relationship before they divorced when my dad was a young teenager. After the split, they never spoke to or about each other again. When my grandmother died, my grandpa didn't show up to her funeral. That disappointed me, but honestly, no one was surprised. 2 years later, when my grandpa passed away, I was going through his things and found a Bible. That shocked me for 3 reasons. First, everyone thought my grandpa was an atheist. But this Bible was clearly well used. There were notes, underlined words, and even whole passages circled. Second, the Bible was a gift from a man who was famous for murdering a politician in my country. He had written a message on the first page. Third, my grandpa had cut out and saved my grandmother's obituary inside the Bible. I don't remember exactly what page it was on because I accidentally dropped it, but the passage was beautiful. It showed he really cared and mourned her. I still keep that Bible. Oh, and we also found out that my grandpa had another son, 25 years younger than my dad. He looks just like my dad. He's part of the family now. My grandfather's war story. My grandfather never talked much about his teenage years. The only thing he told me was that he grew up on the island of Java in the 1940s, even though his roots were German and Dutch. When he passed away, he left me an autobiography he had written for after his death. In it, he explained that his father, my great-grandfather, after whom I'm named, worked as a radio engineer for the Dutch government. He built long-range radio stations, over 1,000 kilometers away. My grandfather and his siblings went to a boarding school in the Black Forest in Bavaria. When their parents visited, they found out the kids had been forced into the Hitler Youth. So, they took the 3 siblings and brought them to Java. Things were fine until the Japanese invaded Java. They went straight to their cottage because their scouts knew my great-grandfather was a radio engineer. The Japanese took the family hostage to force him to build radio stations to help with their military operations. When my grandfather was 16, he got separated from his family and was sent to 6 different prison camps during the war. In 1945, at the war's end, he was in a prison camp near Kyoto. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall, 22 years old, and weighed just 83 pounds. When the Emperor of Japan surrendered and bowed to the Americans, the Japanese soldiers were told to surrender to the highest-ranking Westerner nearby. Since my grandfather was the oldest person in his camp, he became in charge of the camp and the 300 soldiers there for 3 days until the U.S. Marines arrived. He said he had spent those 3 days trying to visit Kyoto, since he had been living outside the city for over a year. But the Marines showed up just 1 day before he was about to go. After that, he was taken to the USS Missouri to witness the signing of the peace treaty. Then they sent him to a U.S. Naval hospital in the Philippines to get healthy again. That's where he developed a lifelong love of pancakes because they fed him those to help him regain weight. I never knew any of this until I read what he left behind. Since I'm his only male grandchild, he also gave me some other amazing things: a family tree tracing back to 1276, German record-keeping is something else, a ball cap from the USS Missouri, a U.S. Marine field jacket given to him to keep warm, and my favorite, the original pamphlet dropped over his prison camp in 1945 announcing the end of the war and that the Marines were coming to free them. Family secrets and a dark past. When I was 5, my great-uncle, let's call him a, died. His funeral was a closed casket, and I asked my mom why. She told me he had been shot. Years later, in my late teens, I learned more. I had killed himself outside a bar one night because he thought the police were after him. The gun he used was never found. That bar was owned by my maternal aunt's ex-husband, Jay. Then, when I was 22, A's brother, B, was accused of possessing child pornography and molesting a minor. I was shocked and told my mom, but she wasn't surprised. She said some family members had long suspected that A and B were alike in some ways. A had molested a friend of his niece. When he found out police were coming to arrest him for child molestation, he shot himself. After that, Jay called my dad to give him a heads up about what happened. They talked about the gun because Jay stole it from the crime scene and gave it to my dad that same night. The gun is a World War II pistol that belonged to my great-grandfather. Jay took it so the pistol would stay in the family and not get locked away as evidence. B is now in prison, where he will likely die before finishing his sentence. So, in short, 2 of my great-uncles were child molesters, and my dad now has a World War II pistol that was used in a suicide. The skeleton found in a garden. In my town, there was a woman who passed away. After she died, people were cleaning up her garden and found what looked like a model skeleton. Turns out, her husband had gone missing mysteriously back in the mid-1990s. I didn't know her personally, but here's what I gathered from local news and people. She was pretty well liked in our small town and told everyone her husband had left her for another woman. She kept a beautiful garden full of rare orchids and took great care of it. But she was secretive about the garden and didn't let visitors in, worried they might trample the flowers. The woman who found the skeleton was a teacher, I think. At first, she thought it was a fake skeleton wrapped in plastic behind the shed. Then she noticed there was liquid and a bad smell. The garden faced the street a bit, so forensic teams had tents up there for weeks. It's strange to think I probably walked within 5 meters of a missing, murdered man for about 4 years going to school nearby. Hidden sorrows in my family. There are a lot of things I've learned about my family. My mother had a teenage pregnancy that ended in a stillborn baby. None of us knew about it. I'm sure my father didn't know either. I chose not to tell him. One of my favorite uncles was suspected by his own daughter of being a pedophile. I find that hard to believe for many reasons, but I'll never really know the truth. My cousin, before he was murdered, asked his father to build him a rough box for when he died. He was only 33. His last words, said to a witness, still haunt me, I'm really cold and want to go home. Most recently, my father died. I think he knew he was sicker than he let on and didn't want to worry me. He reached out to people he hadn't talked to in years, telling them how much they meant to him. He didn't take his own life, he had a stroke. The hardest part about all this is that my parents had these secret pains they kept hidden. They tried to protect us from the truth, but it's still painful when you find out from someone else. The dark side of my Nana. My Nana always gave me a strange feeling. I didn't really like her or hate her, I just thought she was a regular old lady until she died. After she passed, my mom told me something I never knew. Nana used to be a religious fanatic. She would yell at my mom for hours just because she had a fly on her or was wearing jeans that were a little tight. She said it was inviting the devil. Nana even made my mom and her brother beat each other with sticks in the backyard. When my mom's brother died in a car accident, Nana mocked him at the funeral. She said he deserved it because he drank underage, not while driving, just drinking in general, and that he was burning in hell. She called him good riddance and worse. She was a monster. My mom had to run away when she was 18. Nana only calmed down when my mom had kids because she wanted grandchildren. Mom, being forgiving, let Nana back into her life on the promise she wouldn't hurt us like she hurt her. My mom may have forgiven her, but I haven't. Deep down, Nana didn't really change. Looking back, I can see how much Nana's abuse damaged my mom's life and mental health. She never really healed. I wish I could talk to my mom about trauma and all that now that I'm an adult, but it's too late for that. Edit, for those wondering, my mom has also passed away. That's what I meant by too late for that now. The great aunts and family secrets. I had these great aunts who all lived together their whole adult lives and never got married. They were pretty overbearing and a bit too involved in my granddad's life. He was their youngest brother. The second eldest aunt was especially loud and argumentative. She got worse as she got older. One memory I have is her loudly singing God Save the Queen in the living room the first time she met my Irish aunt. She also used to slip whiskey shots into everyone's tea and coffee, whether they wanted it or not. Most family stories on my mom's side come from her because, even though she was second eldest, she was the last to die. One story she told was that my granddad caused the death of his baby sister. She said that when he was young, he picked her up, but since he was so small, he dropped her and she hit her head. Shortly after, the story goes, the eldest sister was crossing the street to post the obituary and was hit by a tram and killed. When the second eldest aunt died, we cleared out the house and found lots of family documents, including birth and death certificates. It turns out the baby sister died of whooping cough. She let my granddad go to his grave believing he caused his baby sister's death, and I still can't understand why. Also, the eldest sister didn't die posting the obituary, she died about 10 years later. So my granddad let her lie about that, even though he knew the truth. It's confusing as hell, and now we wonder how many other things we believed that were actually lies. While clearing out the house, we also found a bunch of photos of the second eldest aunt and a group of women in what looked like army uniforms, but the armbands were cut out of the photos with a craft knife. No one knows why. Those were the few family photos she didn't burn, which is pretty frustrating.